5 o'clock, we'll get the meeting started. We'll start right away with the communication items and move it over to you, Janelle.
All right, sounds good. So I know we've got a little bit more in-depth presentation for the elementary and secondary, but I'll invite the elementary principal up for just the highlights of the building.
Hey everybody, welcome. Kudos to our family-based team for welcoming author Kevin Lovegreen to come in and kick off I Love to Read Month. Fabulous speaker. He reached all of our kiddos from K through 5th grade, kept them engaged. He's a Minnesota author. We had ordered one book per homeroom teacher called Frozen Fun, so the teachers were reading the book aloud both before and after he came, and so it was really a nice way to connect with kids. So kudos to the team for the recommendation. Kudos for Kevin for coming in. We've got grade level activities and contests going on for the rest of the month, and we're kicking off Stop, Drop, and Read this week. So every day the whole school stops, drops, and reads at a certain time of the day. It's fun, the kids are excited. Kudos also to our elementary wrestlers. Boy, the trophies are coming in fast. They are doing really, really well, and they're super busy. So 2 thumbs up to all those wrestlers. And a continued kudos to all of our staff for implementing implementing letters into some of our tier 1 instruction. You know, the ultimate goal is that we're able to reach kids no matter where they are. And so it's exciting to see the transition take place. Updates. Our playground committee is meeting here again in February. We met in January, and since then we're bringing ideas to the faculty, different levels of faculty and different teams within our faculty. The date's been shared. We're finalizing the budget. There's a Google Doc that we're going to put out to get some student input, where we're going to organize ourselves with what our dream list is and then have kids vote on what they'd really think their top maybe 5 items would be to upgrade our playground, so that we can create ourselves a vision and a timeline and get an overall pick of what our playground should look like. We're going to talk about items, cost, and a fundraising plan. So we'll start meeting monthly and more often as needed as we get close to that May 26th date for our big end of the year gathering. I came back from the MESPA conference. That was last Wednesday through Friday. Minnesota Elementary School Principals Association. Lots of good takeaways. Thanks for allowing me to go. My favorite part was the focus seems to be on building those relationships and the importance of relationships, even though students, staff, and all of our stakeholders have been through some pretty trying times with the pandemic, that at the heart of any learning is that feeling of being welcomed and having a connection with adults. It was exciting to do a couple sessions that talked about the MTSS model and MDE's new compass plan. Look for more to come on that. It seems to be in line with our goals as an administrative team of aligning all of the initiatives and programs. So My Savers for behaviors, letters for interventions, PBIS for the overall behavior piece. I think we're going to do some really good things coming forward. And digital curriculum writing, Ms. Jacoby, Spaeth, Hecht, Lawrence, and Hengel recently completed their digital curriculum writing session. Wonderful work. All of them worked on ELA. They worked together as a team. They were able to transition from what they did in COVID with our remote learning to what digital learning can look like for kids and how to make that applicable to the settings that we're in now. They're going to continue the process because they buy into that and that organizational piece and how it helps them teach and it best helps kids learn. And so that's exciting. You'll hear more about that moving forward too. Upcoming, our PBIS All-School Reward is February 25th and 28th, so all of our students grades K through 5 will be coming over to the PAC Center for an hour, and we have some different activities planned. Conferences are coming up. The NHS is going to be doing Connected for Love, which is an exchange of books and games and all kinds of things to keep kids active and engaged at home. It's our first time, right, Alyssa? First time doing that? So that'll be going on in our cafeteria. Families are welcome to bring any games and things that they're not using anymore and donate them. And then kids and families are welcome to come in and just take some of the games home at no cost. So it can be an exchange or a give or a take wherever families are. That's conferences February 22nd from 12 to 8. Our first grade music program is on February 24th at 2 o'clock in person at the auditorium here at school. We're looking forward to that too. So it's a busy time, looking forward to our spring programming and then of course getting ready for next year. But thanks for your support. Do you have any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, move on to the secondary principal. David.
All right, well, I just want to give you an update on a few things that I touched on at the last meeting with registration We did decide to offer the careers class next year again, get that back in. It'll be a required class for our sophomores. And that will come out of our social studies department. So that's something that we kind of lost over the last few years. And we just felt like 10th grade was a good time for that based on maybe a little bit more maturity and a little more insight onto what they might want to be doing in the future. So we're also adding another class in our language arts department, and it's going to be a digital curriculum class, and students will learn about different platforms and how to make money on social media, how to be responsible on social media, and kind of the whole realm of what students are kind of going through right now. We are brainstorming ideas for our middle school students to give some training either yet this year or next fall, incorporated into our fall welcome back for our middle school students on being a good digital citizen. And if we deal with issues every once in a while with social media and navigating through that with our younger students, and so we're hoping that we can provide some of that within that framework. We'll start communicating with seniors. It's getting to be that time of the year. They're signing up with putting their correct names in and caps and gowns and things like that. And last year we started a website for seniors that had all the information on it with scholarships and things like that. So we'll reactivate that for this class coming up shortly. And Mrs. Campbell is communicating about scholarships and just trying to get the word out there. We have every year we have scholarships that are unclaimed, and so we're looking to find seniors that are really interested in filling out those applications so that we can provide some of that. We have some really great donors in our community. So we have Sweet Fest this weekend. Middle school dance is Friday. High school dance is on Saturday. One issue that we continue to have that most high schools are having is vaping in the school. Things have changed a little bit over the years where it's harder to detect vaping, and students have access to it. They're finding ways, and it's been an issue again this year. And every once in a while, it'll just kind of, we'll have a week where we're dealing with that a lot, and then it'll kind of cool off a little bit. We've had a number of instances in the last month that we're concerned about, and so we are monitoring the bathrooms, and we have timers with fobs on our middle school and high school locker rooms, and they're set to go on and off at certain times, and we're trying to get that schedule refined and just limit access to those areas a little bit. And it's been an issue, and we've also we're locking the doors by the fitness center during the school day from now on, and that just will students will have to be in this part of the building in order to use the bathroom during those times. But it's an issue. Every principal I talk to, it's an issue, and hopefully we can continue to try to educate students about it, and we'll keep working on it. Tonight will be the first night of our school store. We have been working with Jen Anfinson. She's a parent. Her and Elise Hagan, who teaches our marketing class and runs the coffee shop. They've been designing some new t-shirts and sweatshirts, and tonight at the basketball game there'll be a glass cabinet that was donated by the Rose Center 2 years ago, and we have just kind of been waiting for a use for it. And so if you go out there tonight in between that hallway by the concession stand, you'll see some items on display and you can purchase those through the concession stand. So we'll continue to grow that. I think they wanna work something out, where some type of store is available down in the pack also, so kind of exciting. And from a activities standpoint, the shot clocks that will go into effect not next year but the year after. We did order those early to try to beat the rush because it will be in all high schools next year, and those are actually scheduled to be installed tomorrow. So the company will come in and get everything hooked up, and then the wiring will be done at a different time. We were maybe thinking about trying to use them for a game this year, just for practice, but I'm not sure that we'll get to that point. But we'll have them for summer and for next year to kind of practice on it. It's gonna be interesting trying to find somebody that's gonna do it. The high school league came out with a 4-page manual on just the shot clock rules. And so you really have to be on your toes with that. So we'll have a year to practice and hopefully find somebody. One act play took second place at sections on Saturday in Albany. So congratulations to Mr. Smalla and the performers. Gymnastics, they have sections this weekend on Saturday in Litchfield, so good luck to them. The wrestling, the team sections are at Minnewaska on February 17th. And girls hockey received the number 2 seed, and they will have a home game in Richmond on February 15th. Oh. Questions for me?
Are we going to be putting shot clocks in the pack also, or only in the main gym?
It'll just be where varsity plays.
I was thinking that would be kind of hard to do.
Yep.
Are we looking at graduation outside again this year?
Yeah, I would like to, yeah. Yep.
How about gymnastics? Is that working out just how we had hoped when we put everything together?
It's been great. It
Okay,
really has
that's-
been great. We've had a couple of the events where we've had gymnastics and either a boys or a girls basketball game. And yeah, it's been great.
And everybody's happy.
Yes.
And we're in the school finally after all these years.
Yep, yep. The issue with gymnastics this year has been finding judges. We've had a number of meets that we couldn't go to, or we couldn't host a meet because finding judges for gymnastics is just really becoming an issue, and so hopefully that will get better next year, but
Good.
okay, thank you.
Bruce, you could judge.
You have to know something about it.
All right. So Mr. Dickhausen is not able to be with us today, but I do have a report from him. The PAC report, they continue to add new members. Usage continues to be very strong. 4 of the next 5 weekends, there are major events scheduled at the PAC. So it's really also doing what the intent of the facility space was. General community ed report, the spring brochure goes to the press next week. Many new and exciting programs and offerings. February 19th, mark your calendars, come on out for the pickleball tournament, live music and medallion hunt, the first annual Winter Fest, so that should be pretty fun. There's gonna be more information on the community ed website if you wanna check it out. Otherwise, there's flyers throughout the building and throughout the community as well. There's currently 108 students at PAWS. And preschool, the 22-23 preschool registrations will open up on March 15th. So parents wanna mark their calendars. I know how that goes as well. All right, Bulldog live stream report. The winter live stream viewership has been very robust. There's 2 regular season broadcasts left, and they're hopefully going to be able to stream any playoffs. And then they're putting together the spring broadcast season right now, so that's awesome. And then check your email because the Bulldog Bark went out today. So that is able to be found in your email as well. If there are any other questions, reach out to Mr. Dickhausen or I can pass those questions along. Okay. Technology Director. I'll put that hat on for a moment to read his paper. He actually is not available today either. One of the things that he identified is that finally, the order that was placed last March for all the laptops have completely arrived 10 months later. So if you want to talk about supply chain issue, that was a really, we experienced that. There's just a couple of desktops that are going back in, the liaison offices, the nurse's office, but all of those will be deployed for the rest of the spring. So it'll be really nice to have that project checked off and completed. Our 6th grade wing of the middle school was put onto its own zone this summer, and we were having some issues with connectivity, and there were things where it would just like lose connectivity for the whole wing. And what they found is that they were bad fibers. I didn't know there was such a thing, but the EPS came out and replaced it all for free. And here forward, and since that replacement, it has been wonderful. So that was something that I thought was also notable, because anytime there's technology issues, our students and our staff absolutely notice that. So it was nice to have that fixed free of charge. This is the time of year that he starts getting the quotes on our Chromebooks for our incoming 6th graders and 9th graders. Typically, there's about 160 that are ordered every year. So these are completely funded through the tech levy, which I think is important just to remember. He typically is able to get it for a little less than budgeted, and then what he does is he goes in and replaces the iPads that are part of the one-to-one initiative with our 1st graders. So that as those are nearing the 5-year age cycle, he can recycle those as well. So nice to have a plan to keep that technology updated and moving forward versus having things become obsolete and outdated. And then lastly, the grades 2 through 5 are one-to-one cart models. They're all equipped with Chromebooks from the secondary school, and so there's no need to purchase extra Chromebooks to fill the equipment need at those grade levels. So any other questions, he said, please feel free to let him know. But that is Jonah's technology update today. And with that, I will invite Steve up for our buildings and grounds.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good evening. Let's see, to start my update, I've been mainly working a lot with the punch list items for the pack house area yet. There's been quite a few outstanding things. One that's occurring right now are roof leaks yet in the facility, and I had a really good meeting last Friday with SiteLogic and emphasized the fact that things need to happen here sooner than later here and get going on this stuff here, because it's been a really frustrating thing for us with the things that are outstanding here, such as there again, like the roof leaks happening right now. The hot water heater in the new pack area is not working. I think they kind of determined that there was part of it is that wasn't hooked up to soft water, and that the chemical makeup of the water in the city then was very hard on the hot water heater, and that's part of it, but it's all under warranty yet and things like that, so there's no issue there, but it's got to get something so that it's resolved around soft water, so that I just got a feeling if it wasn't or something, then the next time it happens, it's going to be a year and one day that it's going to go out or something, or things, and then it would be our cost or something, but HVAC issues yet, work with punch list items, the spray booth in the welding shop, there were some issues with that, along with the sprinkler heads weren't put lower down into the area, and there's some floor repairs, so there's a few more items along with that, but those are the major ones right in there that trying to keep on top of those guys and get some results done on this. So been working with Brad and Gary yet with the boilers on just there's different tests that you need to run on the water makeup in a boiler on how it should be the chemicals that you need to use to treat the water. And we've been having some fluctuations with that, but we're learning and figuring it out all together and taking care of that also. Along with that, we have CenterPoint Energy as our natural gas supplier here, and we have that program where we would go on a curtailment if necessary, and we would have to switch to a different fuel source, and we have not even had to do that yet this year. But we've been working with training on all of us to be able to switch those boilers over to fuel oil if necessary and things. But yeah, I've been very surprised that we haven't had to do that. So yeah. Staffing. We do have one coming up that is going to be leaving the PAC area, and so I'm working on filling that position along with looking at the summer help that we need coming up, and then also with the big project at the elementary school on just evaluating all the help this summer, because we'll end up probably taking the custodians that we have at the elementary school and bringing them over to the high school the first part of the summer, and then probably the rest of them going over to there. So I've been meeting with them on that and going through that process and things with them. So other than that, then I'm kind of getting into the spring summer mode, even trying to look ahead at different projects we have coming up for the summer, getting the gym floor scheduled for waxing, looking at the track out there as soon as we get that open, that we can see to get an idea to see if we can get some crack fill done on that track area to extend the life of that, and looking at that. So that's about all I have. Questions?
Do you think it's been actually pretty cold this winter?
Yes.
Even though, because we never had any warm weather to offset the averages. Do you think it had something to do with our efficiency of the boilers as to why we haven't had to switch? What's your gut feeling?
I don't think so on that. I think I still think when they want that extra gas or something, I don't.
Oh, so you think it's more company oriented?
Correct, yes,
than us?
yep,
Well, that's interesting, because
Yep.
the boilers were supposed to bring us some efficiency.
yep,
Therefore, if it's a 10 or 15% efficiency, and we would have to switch over, that would mean we wouldn't have to so fast.
Oh,
okay, thank you.
all right. Well, thank you so much. It's nice to hear conversation of summer.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. All right, so, we are gonna invite up, Jody and Aaron, I'm sorry. They are here to do our pre-sale bond report, and so at your tables, at your spaces, you will find, your information that they will be walking through with you today.
We've got some extras too, so don't worry, we'll get you your own copies.
Oh, there's one.
Okay, so you approved the resolution in December, but we like to give you some updated estimates once we get closer to the sale date. So I will just touch base on, do you want me just to talk from this, or do we wanna project it? or- Either way. So what do you like to do?
I can
You guys
project
have
it, I can project it, and then
along, or-
they have it, and we're good to go, okay?
Okay. So on the first page, you'll notice that we know that you approved $1,485,000 as the bond amount. We're expecting to get a premium bid, which is explained a little bit more on the third page of the pre-sale report. So we're now estimating $1,430,000 for the bond size to finance the project costs that we need. This is the health and safety indoor air quality projects that you approved in December. And bonds, the debt service on the bonds payments will be made from your property tax levies and state aid. So you do get quite a bit of state aid as part of the LTFM program. And you'll notice that we do have a call date set up. So the term will be about 14 years and 10 months, but we will have a February 1, 2030 call date. So if you're all still around the table here and we have lower interest rates at that point in time, we'll be able to take advantage of that and have some savings. On the next page, you'll see that the resolution that you approved, so this is page 2, the resolution that you approved at your December meeting did include the state credit enhancement language. So in that next section under the rating, Moody's will give you a nice high AA2 rating as part of that program. You don't pay anything to participate in the program, but the state does guarantee the payment of your debt should you not be able to make a bond payment. So that's why Moody's assigns you that nice high AA2 rating. Your rating on your own, your underlying rating is an A1. So we will be going through the rating process and we'll have Janelle and Carrie involved in that. And hopefully they'll affirm that A1 rating because that's a nice high rating too. So that's our plan and that's what we are basing our interest rate estimates on. You'll see a couple of bullet points within that basis for recommendation section that I'll highlight. So you are able to finance some of the bond payments with aid that you receive from the state. And you then will make an extra tax levy for the health and safety portion of the bonds. So the deferred maintenance portion, of course, doesn't result in any additional revenue to the district, but the health and safety portion or the large project portion does. And then importantly, that last bullet, debt service levies for bond payments qualify for the school building bond credit. And when these debt service levies start, it will be at the full amount of that school building bond aid credit. So that's been phasing in over time and now is at will be at a 70% level. So that's helpful. So we'll solicit competitive bids just like we always do for your bond sales. Starting on page 3 then, that describes the premium pricing that I referred to earlier. So we are expecting the bond size to be a little bit lower than what you approved. Review of existing debt, we're always taking a look at your debt to see if you have any refunding opportunities. You don't at this point in time. And then continued disclosure and arbitrage monitoring are some regulatory requirements related to the bonds. Page 4, once you receive the bond proceeds, you'll be able to invest those until you need to make payments for the project costs. And then the last section there just identifies the other service providers we're working with. So your bond attorney from Kennedy and Graven, Bond Trust Services as paying agent, and as I mentioned, Moody's is the rating agency that has been rating your debt. The next page then shows the schedule. So you'll see starting with the December 14th date when you authorized the sale of the bonds. Today is when we're presenting the pre-sale report to you. We will be going through a due diligence call also then with Janelle and Carrie to go through the official statement, and that's the document that gets sent out to the underwriters and the investors, kind of like a prospectus. And we'll also have that rating agency conference call that I mentioned. We'll send out the official statement, and then we're scheduled to receive proposals and bids and have you award sale at a special board meeting on March 8th. And I think Janelle's talked to you about that. We're trying to get ahead of the next week when the Federal Reserve meets again. So we're expecting them to announce another increase in interest rates, and not sure how the market will react to that in the municipal bond market, but we just think getting ahead of that is probably in your best interest. And then we'll close on March 30th, so that's when you'll have your proceeds, and I will let Aaron cover the financial schedules.
All right, thanks, Jody. The next page is the sources and uses. So that first column there is the deferred maintenance portion, and as Jody referenced, that's coming out of your existing LTFM revenue. So you can see on the third row there is an estimated project cost of about $877,000 for that portion of it. And if you go all the way to the bottom, the deposit to the construction fund is just over $886,000, so covering your needed costs there. In the second column is the health and safety or the indoor air quality portion. You can see the estimated project cost of $1.46 million. Then the district is contributing ESSER funds towards that project as well for $972,000. So at the bottom, the amount of funds you'll need then is approximately $495,000 from the bond proceeds, in addition to the ESSER funds to cover that portion of the cost.
And that total is the $2.3 million project cost that we've been talking about all the time. When we looked at the different options for financing that, this is how the board decided to break it down. So that number should be familiar to all of us, right? The 2.3?
The next page is the debt service schedule, and this is for both of those components combined. And so I'll just kind of move on to the next page to the breakout a little bit more. So here's the deferred maintenance portion. In the third column, you can see the LTFM revenue. So the district currently generates about $370,000 in LTFM revenue. Then moving across to the right, to almost the far right for the initial debt service levies. So you'll be levying approximately $75,000 to $80,000 on an annual basis. which will still leave the district with about $300,000 in LTFM revenue on an annual basis. So still a healthy amount to cover your needs on an annual basis. And then the next 2 pages, so the first is the table for the indoor air quality or health and safety portion. So this comes with the property tax levy, so we're showing you the schedule there. I like going on to the next page, which is the graph, the green and yellow graph. I think it's a little bit easier to read and understand. So this is showing the estimated tax rate. Again, the dotted line is the 2019 kind of pre-election estimated tax rate that we have. The yellow is the proposed new debt. So you can see there is a small property tax impact there. And in addition, we are keeping that tax rate as constant as we can over the course of making the payment. So that's our summary. Jody and I can answer any questions you have about this.
Yeah, and I'll maybe make a couple comments about interest rates. So interest rates have come up a little bit in January. They came down a little bit last week. We're still lower than when we sold your bonds in September of 2019. So even though everyone's been a little concerned about what's happening, we are still, historically speaking, we're still in a nice low interest rate environment. So we expect both of these components to come in a little under 2.5%. So I think that's, everybody would, I think that's still nice and low. So not to worry right now. I think we're, again, still looking pretty good, even though we've had a little bit of an uptick in the month of January. So
It seems like we've always done a little better than your projections.
we hope so. Yeah, we've got a little cushion built
We're
in, so we
counting
hope
on
so.
Don't let us down now.
Knock on wood, yeah,
Right.
we'll do our best. So that's again why we appreciate you guys being willing to have us come on March 8th for that special meeting. We just think that's gonna be a better time than waiting until next week, so.
Any other questions for Ellers?
They can just go for
Jody
it,
or
right?
Aaron? Great, we're ready.
All right,
Okay, okay, thanks so much.
well, thank you so much. All right,
Item C will be 2022-2023 budget development.
okay.
Or you know.
Yep, so, there's 2 things that I wanna just, I do not have the revised budget, spreadsheet that we're used to seeing. I have some other information that I'm gonna share with you because, we sent our data file over to CMERDC, which is what translates it all and pulls it in and does all the calculations. And at the end of last week, when we went to open the file, it was all not changed, and it was all what it was supposed to be. So we've been going back and forth with CMERDC, and they've been working with us and Amanda and Carrie have put in just a ton of time trying to figure out how to get this to you today. But I also wanted to be respectful of making sure that they want to dot their i's and cross their t's and make sure the information is correct before it comes to you. So the revised 21-22 budget spreadsheet that you're used to seeing, you will see at the February 22nd meeting. But what I do have for you then are our estimates, and I wanted to walk you through some of the things that we took into consideration as we looked at this. So the first document that you're gonna see it's just called it's the assumptions, essentially, kind of some of the things that we took into consideration. So when we had our audit, there were our food service budget had a very hefty balance. And so with that, one of the things that we needed to do was we needed to spend that down so we wouldn't lose money in our food service fund. So one of the things that we did do is bill some of the costs that are eligible for that fund to offset general fund expenditures. So you'll see $123,000 in expenses were moved to cover fuel, garbage, electricity, water, sewage, all of those things that are again eligible for that fund to be used, to draw that down to a state where we don't lose any of those funds, and it also helped to offset the cost. We also looked at some of the eligible use of QComp. Our QComp committee sat down with Carrie and myself, and we walked through offsetting some costs for some of our teachers' salaries. So that is also an area that we were able to find some savings. And then there was also a $40,000 COVID, essentially it is to offset the cost of the hours and staff that are doing some of the COVID work. So between our school nurse and myself as the COVID coordinator, and our testing time, we were able to offset some of those salaries. So when you look at that, what we're anticipating is that, our unassigned fund balance will be different than we projected at we originally projected about a $256,000 deficit. And so what we're projecting as it comes in will be closer to about $136,000. Now, that's kind of a 1 year, gonna get us through one more year before we start really looking at some substantial discussions. But I wanted to kind of preface that as we walked into the next documents, okay? I think it's also important to kind of take a reminder, so the next sheet that you're gonna see are the ADMs. And the ADM count is, again, I wanna just remind you that ADMs are not enrollment. So the average daily membership, there are students that are weighted differently for funding purposes. So what the document here that we're looking at is going to account for the ADMs, okay? So you'll see that in 2021, where the numbers came in, we're at 895. As we are working through 21-22, we're sitting at about 908. So we're up a little bit, hoping that sustains, but again, we're gonna conservatively kind of budget forward to 22-23, and also taking a look at our graduating classes and our numbers in, numbers out, sustaining that at 895. So that's kind of our basis number as we calculate for our the general funding that we get from the Department of Ed and all of our levy dollars and things like that, okay? So the next document that you're gonna see is the fund balance document that will look familiar to you all. And what we, again, kind of took a look at is in 2021, the 278,980, which was the difference in the expenditures and the revenue for 2021, that was based on the audit, okay? So again, taking a look at 21-22, again, this second row, so my hesitation in putting these out is because, again, they're not completely, they're not verified through our database. However, it's a really close, it's a good point for discussion, okay? And so again, the reason that number is less than we anticipated was because we were able to offset some of those costs with that food service fund balance, with some additional COVID money that can only be used for testing purposes. And then working with our Q-Comp committee to offset salaries. So taking that into consideration, as you look at this document, you will see some of the other variables that were taken into consideration. Our contracts are settled with, the only areas that we have left are the admin assistants that are in supporting the offices. And then we'll have our transportation contract, but that will be effective for next year as well. So we're getting very, very close to a nice solid revised budget number that we can feel comfortable with. As you look at that following year, the 22-23 is it's a pretty startling number. So again, this is making an assumption that our referendum is not passed, and we do not have that additional revenue. So our fund balance policy states 12.5%. So if we look at in 21-22, 12.5% is about $1.2 million for a fund balance. And you can see that the fund balance at the end of 21-22 is still a 1.6, so we're still okay. As we move into 22-23, and our expenditures go up to that $10 million, the 12.5% fund balance is about a 1.258, and we're hovering right next to that. So that would be with no reductions, okay? I think one of the things I think we should talk through as a board is an approximation of splitting out that, if we ended at 136,000, looking forward to 477, what we've been talking about and anticipating is approximately $200,000 in reductions as we build our next year's budget. And if we do that, you'll see on the next page what those numbers look like. So The second page does take into account, a $200,000, recommended, reduction in the budget planning, which would put our 22-23 budget at, deficit spending of $277,000. Now, again, the board could decide you'd like to be a little bit more aggressive and, not take as much of that. You might decide, that that's an adequate place to start. But those are some things that we'll wanna have some discussion about and decide kind of where your priorities are as we build forward the budget for next year. Are there any questions that you have about this information?
I think it's a good start. We're gonna keep talking about our minimum amount that we're gonna keep here. Just in my thought pattern, which isn't accurate by any means, we have energy costs, we have basic fixed cost of maintaining the school, okay? And then we have instruction costs, which is the lion's share of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I just wanna be real careful when we're cutting, that we're trying not to cut the programs.
Yeah.
Since I was a kid, we lost our whole tech ed, which we just rebuilt. Okay, because it's not required for graduation.
Right.
So as these things progress, I just wanna be really careful with that.
Yep.
Personally, if it's a matter of cutting a kid's class or we're dipping into that $1.2 million, I'm interested in dipping into $1.2 million. I need to tell you that right up front, cause we have done a lot of work to try and provide the best education that we could. Certainly, we're down 50 students. Obviously, that's gonna make a little difference, some of which you've already adjusted here for. But I just want to be very careful, cause when I look at the big numbers, how do you pull those numbers out of 23 or 24% of the expense of running school?
Right,
Okay, it's gonna come out of the kids' education somehow,
right,
or their opportunity, let's call it.
right.
So,
Well, even, I'm thinking the same as you, is that I would be more interested in taking over the general fund for the same reasons. I mean, and when you look at our fund balance, 12.5%, that's higher than what is recommended, right? So we would still be within good, good standings if that was the option. I hope we don't have to. But I agree, you don't wanna cut programs.
I would, just say, I agree with all of this. One thing we just wanna keep on that idea and the thought and projections of moving forward, cause you take it over now, we change our policy now, we get it down to a 10%, but at some point in time that money snowballs. We have to just be aware of 3 years now, 4 years down before it snowballs to a point where it's unmanageable. So that's the notion that, I'm no interest in cutting any programs, but I'm also no interest of running us out of money.
Right.
Yep.
I'd be curious what happened.
It looks like so far we're in good shape.
Yes, very much so. Very good shape.
And we're still thinking of a vote next fall, so
Right. And I do think,
nothing to panic about yet.
Right, that's not like we're in a healthy place right now.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
why that conversation I think is easier to have, because it's not like we're in a bad situation.
I do think it will be important for, as we communicate about our needs and why we continue to seek, an increase in our operations dollars so that we can sustain the programming, that people do understand why the things that we have added and the things that have been built since, we've had really significant reductions and since there have been really, very, very deep cuts through the district, because we have built to a really good place. But I think it's gonna be important to take a look at the things that we did do with that operating referendum money, and then also why that has to be received in order to sustain. And I know we've talked a number of times about, in looking at this, I've heard the board say there really is not shouldn't be a threat, and I absolutely understand that, and I think that is an important, it's an important message for us to remember, and to communicate the things that were added, that we are doing with the funds that we receive, and why and why that shortfall is coming in the way it is, so.
I like what you just said, because I think it blends into one of the items we're gonna talk about in a little bit.
It does.
And I think they are extremely interrelated.
Yeah.
I don't know where we were at when I got on the board, but we were bouncing off of zero for a number of years. And Rick, I think you were in on some of that when you came aboard. We weren't able to get this thing rolling. I have to believe before that time, the board probably was saying the same thing we're saying about this minimum amount and all that.
Yeah.
But I think it may be a common thing for boards to be extremely protective of what we've done. But I look at some of what we had when we were younger, home ec, that comes up a lot. People always say, "Oh, you mean you don't have home ec?" Well, that's people that are older. We haven't had home ec forever, and then they call it whatever engineering at the moment. But we lose an instructor, retires, and then we don't rehire them.
Right.
In my mind, that was a loss of something for the kids possibly.
Yeah,
You know, and that's just what I want to be really careful of.
sure, yep. Okay. Any other thoughts or discussion? Again, I apologize, I don't have the, that revised budget number, but it will be there, and it'll be presented at the February 22nd board meeting, so.
I do have one more thing.
Okay,
So when we're looking at the reserve funds, is that, and we look at graphs of reserve funds, is there a way to find out how school districts on average handle those reserve funds? Because if the reserve fund is one of these, and referendums don't always pass.
Right.
Right? So we're not the only district that has that problem, but does that mean that the public kind of silently follows that till they see this happening, where they go back in? And I wonder if there might be data on other schools similar to us where, I guess maybe I shouldn't call it, but it's a flow chart, right?
Yeah, I
So
know
we're
what
just
you're
kind of,
asking,
we're
yeah.
kind of here, we're feeling really good. All of us knew where we were headed
yeah,
with this referendum and what we had to do. But maybe we need to just kind of look in our analysis of how to move forward to find out what districts do.
sure,
Because all these numbers you're talking about here that are red, that's gonna reduce that fund.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
pretty straightforward. It
straight on.
showed up in our last audit report. So some of the people that I talked to wondered what we were gonna use it for. And I showed them the audit report and I said, well, this kind of why right here, because this is what happened. So,
And I hear what you're asking for, and I can see, I'll see what I can find, if there is some data around, and I'm guessing that kind of what you're looking at is, what is the level of support for that ongoing funding when you have a large fund balance versus, or if you're over, or if you're under, and how that correlates, and
Yeah.
I can look into that. Yep, for sure. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts, comments, or, all right,
Student achievement.
okay, now we get the fun stuff. So, I will invite David and Mary up. Do you guys want me to just like shimmy back, or you're gonna, okay?
And Maria.
And, I'll pull up the student achievement data spreadsheet, or the presentation. Where's that? Jeepers creepers.
It's been a day, right? So, in case, I don't know if y'all know Marie Grothy? Yeah, okay, so she's been an interventionist here for
9.2 2 5 years.
She moved into first grade last year for about 3/4 of the year due to COVID. Now she's back with Maria, and there are letters trainers for the district. So we're very fortunate to have these two amazing individuals on board with us. So Maria and Maria are here with us today just to talk a little bit about the specifics of the data, because they work with all of our students with the data that you're seeing tonight. So,
And before we do that, I'll just kind of point out that this is the same format that you saw last year at about this time. And so it was really a nice opportunity to continue to build on the information that was there. And so thank you again for doing that, and I'll stop talking and let you guys go.
go ahead, click away.
All right,
That's us.
all right.
So, the first section of slides, similar to last year, was taken from Infinite Campus, so that's our grading program. And this one was taken from fall reports, because last year that's what we compared as well. So you'll see the blue is 1920, red is 2021, and yellow is 21-22. It'll be that way moving through all the grade levels. This is kindergarten. So kindergarten records scores on their report cards in different fashions, and together let's practice means that our kindergarten kiddos need a little more help. Okay, so they haven't mastered these standards yet. So you can see all the standards on the bottom. They're cut off, but it's basically recognizing all letters, reading the sight words, identifying letter sounds, can read on-level text, recognizing lower and uppercase letters, talks a little bit about patterning and about recognizing and understanding numbers to 100 and all of those kinds of things. I think the point here on this slide is that if you look at the golden colors, so this current school year, this fall, look at how much growth we've had from the past 2 years. In most cases, and look at the intervals on that vertical axis as well, we're counting in intervals of 5 percentage points. So most of our data is at about 2.5% or less this year of kiddos that need some help with Together Let's Practice on those basic kindergarten standards. So we've seen amazing growth in kindergarten this year.
Also linked with that, with the red bars, that would be, so last year when I had to transition into first grade, unfortunately, we weren't able to have as many services of MTSS until Miss Laura rejoined our team in December. So that might be also reasoning for the fluctuation of those red bars being so high last year.
First grade not meeting the standards. This one's interesting. I didn't know how to title it, and I didn't know how to title it last year either, and I actually changed it this year. So if you look at math, you'll still see the blue, red, and golden bars. Again, look at those intervals on the side. They're now 10 percentages each. So we're looking at about 4% of kiddos that aren't meeting the standards in math this year, and that goes back to the fall. When you move across to literacy, that looks really terrible, right? It's like, oh my goodness, look at those golden percentages increase. But actually in fall, by the end of fall quarter, we want all of our kindergartners to be reading at least literacy level D. So kiddos in first grade start at level A, and then they move up to level B, and they move up to level C, and they move up to level D. And then they move on from there. So you can see that actually our children are making really impressive growth over the past 3 years. We've got a lot of kiddos that are reading at level D or higher when we talk about fall data. Second grade not meeting the standards. Again, subject area, the percentages on the side, if we're looking at our intervals, are only at 2%, and these are all computer generated, right? You plunk in the numbers and the graphs are created. And you can see that all of our kiddos in second grade this fall were meeting their standards in the 5 areas listed.
And these are comparing second graders last year to second graders this year, right?
Yes, yes, so it's not the same kids, it would
Correct.
be, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Clarify.
Third graders below 70%. Again, on this graph, you see that the intervals on that left-hand side are at 2%. We've shown some really good growth in most of the areas. Math appears to be an outlier, but again, let's focus that that's 5% of kiddos scored below 70% in math. And 5% of the kiddos in there is about 4 kids. And universal tiered instruction says that that's about right. You know, your tier 3 kiddos are about 5% of your students. In talking with our third grade team, they shared that this year we're holding kids more accountable and we're teaching them responsibility and some of those things. We've got our kids every day, whereas last year we focused more on, we're glad you're here, here are the skills that we're going to teach, but we didn't necessarily have our kids in front of us every day because of all the different learning models. We always triangulate the data, so I pulled the third grade data from CBM math, which is fact fluency, and A math, which is overall math skills, and there's an increase in student success levels in both of those areas. So this is just one little benchmark, but it's valid to note that that seems a little bit striking. Fourth grade kiddos below 70%, again, you can see the progress that our kids have made and the gains that our staff have been able to bring forth from fall. And up to our fifth grade friends, very similar. And then we move into the Fast Bridge portion, one of the big reasons that we brought Mrs. Rasmussen and Mrs. Grothy with, because they're guiding us through what Fast Bridge looks like and how we assess kids and how we progress monitor them. E-reading is one of those assessments that we do with our primary kids, and you can see in the bottom right-hand corner what's assessed in each of those grade levels in K1 at various times of the year.
And the reason why there are so many is because in kindergarten and first grade, reading is evolutionary. It is continually moving. There are so many facets and components that are needed for the foundation of reading for students to be able to succeed at that. Some of the best research-based identifiers of successful reading actually are assessments that are taken in kindergarten and first grade, which would be nonsense words and phoneme segmenting, which is where you take a word and the students are able to say each sound in the word.
And A-reading is one of those broad reading assessments that we've done. And again, you can see the growth on winter 2021. We've got 6% more kiddos that moved from fall to winter in that exceeds category, right? We want them to be making great gains, and this is exciting. I attribute this a lot to letters and to the implementation of those foundational literacy skills with our students. CBMR is a fluency assessment, so students read passages to their teachers, and it's a quick check of the mistakes, the errors they make, such as omissions and substitutions. And again, we're looking at growth in that area, so. And A-Math is a program that does the broad math abilities. We do that one, do we do that in?
We do that
Second grade?
second grade through fifth.
Second through
Yeah.
fifth, yeah.
And into the secondary.
Through eighth grade. So data is amazing, and we use it as a tool to decide which kiddos, where the kiddos' needs need to be met in those intervention groups that we do. So our power half-hour groups at the elementary are 20 to 30 minutes every day for every child. And we use this kind of data to say, holy smokes, we really need to provide more supports for this friend, or wow, look at the great progress, let's move them up or throughout the different intervention groups that we have.
Continually through this as well, we don't just base it off of the 3 times a year. We also have progress monitoring that we implement within our interventions because you want that continual data. A lot of times, especially when they're younger, as kindergarten, first grade, there's a ton of movement within that MTSS program because sometimes they just need a little boost in a component and they're solid and ready to go. Sometimes they need a boost in all components, including phonological awareness, letter identification, letter sound identification, et cetera, et cetera. So we also incorporate that, not daily screening, but also weekly progress monitoring based off of their CBMR, which is also proven to be the best indicator of both fluency and comprehension. And then for our younger students, we also utilize letter naming and letter sound and phoneme segmentation. And then also to link it all together, we've been incorporating, and this is the first year that our team has done this as an MTSS team, is incorporating spelling screeners, which we do about once a month, which helps really drive our instruction as to where students are struggling with their reading skills and their spelling skills, because those are so closely intertwined.
Do these charts incorporate SPED students also? It's all students?
Yes, it's all students.
Yep, it's all students.
Thank you.
Because we still need, even if they qualify for special education, we still need to see, especially for their IEP and reevaluation, we still have to see where they are comparative to that grade level.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions or additional comments for our elementary team before we move on to the secondary team?
I'm glad you're measuring it.
Yeah.
You know, because you look at the hard work that has been done, if you weren't measuring it, you wouldn't know.
Right.
And now you can look at this and know.
And it's really exciting when you do get that to see both Maria and I have created spreadsheets along with our team member Edie, our third member who works at the elementary with us, creating charts with all of this data, all the students, all of this data, all the way across, and then you can see, just like in this, all the progress. So all of your spelling screeners, all of your fluency assessments, your comprehension assessments, or your early literacy skills, and seeing that and really having that help drive that instruction, it's very beneficial for the students, and they seem to, when it's data driven like that, it cruises along a lot better.
It's really reassuring to see that you're tracking the students and how they're progressing, and it's not letting things slide.
You would love to hear, sorry, I get excited about our monthly grade level meetings when we sit and we look at graphs and we look at individual kids regardless of, you know, what level they're at, and we're able to just look at that independent child and make decisions according to where's the best fit for them.
And we all know too that you can't just look at scores and judge that growth either. You really have to look within the child, and not just with younger age, older age too. But having that conversation as a grade level, as a team, is really, really nice as well, because then you get to see how those students act in different environments and different places, or if they're dealing with some issues, or if they've finally clicked and in the classroom it's going smoother too. All of those components play a huge part along with the data that we collect, which is why it's important that we meet and communicate that way.
This is exciting, thank you.
Yes.
All right,
Thank you.
wonderful. All right, so let's bring up our secondary team.
I'll leave it there, I won't make you stand.
All right, well, so along with Maria at the high school, we have Mr. Spanier and Mr. Campbell, who help provide interventions to students during designated times, and also by pushing in and having students in their own classroom. Maria has become such an important part of this whole process, and she does such a great job of managing our interventions and working with all of our staff on providing these services. Maria and we met today and kind of went over the data, and she is just in her happy place when she's going through it. So with the secondary information, Maria will talk about some of the graphs, and then I'll talk a little bit about the PSAT and maybe some questions about ACT and things like that. And then there are a couple slides in the back that we left in there from last year. I don't feel that it's good data, but I'll walk through that very quickly with you also. Okay.
All right, so we'll take a look at our math scores first. We use the exact same program, FastBridge. We implemented it a couple years ago, and we transitioned away from Renaissance Learning, which is we use for A reading, STAR. They still take they still use the A reading portion of, no, I don't. No. Sorry. They still use the, help me out here for a second.
Accelerated
Thank
reader
you. They
test.
still use the AR part. So they'll read their books and then take their comprehension tests to see how well they comprehended the book. But as far as our benchmark goes, we use FastBridge data for that, and we no longer give the STAR test. So this is all coming from FastBridge as well, so it's kind of fluid. That's really nice that we have adopted that, so we can have that kindergarten through our 8th graders. So we take a look at this, and this is math, the A math benchmark. This is given in the fall, in the winter, and in the spring. And because of COVID, we only had fall and winter the past couple of years, so we just continued with that. But you can go ahead and look at the data in the high risk category. Yellow is our 2021-22. And really, when we look at, can I draw something on the board really quickly? When we look at high risk, some risk, low risk, and exceeds, to me, when I read that, it's like, okay, really low, and then kind of low, and then still low, and then exceeds. And that's not the way it is at all. So it's like, if we look at the bell curve, And that's kind of the middle where we want kiddos to be. And then we have our little standardized sections over here. This is the high risk over here. And then we have our some risk, and then low risk, and then the exceeds. So like, even though it says some risk, when we look at a standardized score, like this still falls within where we want our students to be. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at these scooters. So, in the high risk category, you can see the yellow in math that we have those higher percentages. Mr. Orland and I talked a little bit about that today. My gut tells me a couple things. Number one, when you're looking at middle school students are a very complex, wonderful group of kiddos who are bursting with everything, right? And so you have this group of kids come in the fall. This is after COVID, and I don't want to blame everything on COVID, but when we have this huge pandemic and then these kids who are trying to figure out who they are themselves, they come from a home with X, Y, and Z going on. There's extra stressors, there's everything else. To me, mental health is the number one that takes precedence. And then these tests, they come in and they know it doesn't count for anything. They know that depending on their score, I might come and talk with them and have a conversation. And then if I know they're not actually where that score is, then it is what it is. It doesn't mean anything else. And so, yes, those scores are higher right there. I think everyone everywhere right now is experiencing that with middle schoolers. On top of that, we also have our 6th and 7th grade group this year. We have 13% of our kiddos who are in special education and receiving math and reading supports, in comparison to our 8th grade who only has 9%. And I know that that fluctuates as years go by, but just keep that in mind too. We have a much higher group of kiddos this year who are in special education, and everyone takes the test. Everyone takes the benchmark, so we have an big picture understanding of where everyone is at. So, that's kind of where we're at with
Can you
percentages.
take a question in the middle of all this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you took a chart like this, and then you look at the chart, are you basing it on us? Or are we taking out what other districts and everything else? Because when it comes to the MCA,
Yep.
that goes out and then kind of almost rate your school with that. This was supposed to give us hopefully a better track of our kids.
Yep.
But there's a relationship somewhere.
Yep.
I don't have a grip on that. And then
Yeah.
in your analysis, are you comparing other districts as to where they're going also? Or is Fastbridge a program that's proprietary just to us? And so state data is not out there.
Great
Good question. So this specifically is our 6th through 8th graders, and this is just their testing in the fall compared to national benchmarks. So looking at all of the other kids in 6th grade who have taken this test, that is kind of the comparison. However, when our kids took this test in the fall, this year, 14% of our kids in 6th through 8th grade, that chunk of kids meet the high risk category, meaning they dropped within this percentage.
As determined by scores across the nation.
As national scores. Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. So this is very specifically our group of kiddos. When I think about the MCAs and that percentage, they have to meet they have to get to, let's say if I'm in 8th grade, I have to get to 850 because 50 is the passing score. Fastbridge doesn't have a math and reading, doesn't have a passing score. They have a fluctuating number that they want students to get within a certain area and region, kind of like the bell curve up there. And so when it says high risk, it's not because they just got a certain number. It's because when they took that test and that score, their scores fell within that region, but also taking into consideration that kiddo in the past and all of their scores before. Like every kid, when I look in here for growth and their goal, every kiddo's growth goal is different based off of all of their previous scores in FastBridge.
Can I also add, one of the other things that this does is it helps to differentiate where a student's deficit is. So if there's an area that is, a student really is, maybe we'll talk about like, I don't know, like, give me an area in the math calculation, well, we'll just use math calc. I
Yep, there
mean,
you go.
if in math calculation, they might really struggle with just some of the rote calculation or application of, but yet they could do word problems with a lower function, right? So maybe they can't multiply, they can't do multiplication facts very well, but they can do a word problem with addition really well. They'll be able to kind of differentiate some of those skill sets, so that, and now all those standards are across the country. That's what's normed across, it's a national norm, so it's across the whole country, not just Minnesota, which Minnesota standards are, or the MCAs are Minnesota. But it's then, it does help to break down where a student's deficits are, so that they can target, you know, if there are things that this kiddo really needs to work on to help solidify a skill before they move on.
And it gives the opportunity to group in small groups, so that, because there are students that have deficits in the same area, maybe not even in the same grade, but they're able to group those students together and work on those interventions.
Real quick too, the assessment itself is almost student-based. So as a student is taking this assessment, it is not the same assessment like it is, MCAs have like 4 different assessments, right? In reading, there's 4 different assessments. There's assessment A, assessment B, assessment C, assessment D, right? In FastBridge, it's completely determined by the student who's taking it. So if they answer the first question correct, they'll get a harder question. But if they answer the question incorrectly, it'll bring it back to a quote unquote easier answer or a lower level skill of either math or reading. Also, what's nice about FastBridge is that you can compare how we are doing as a district percentile versus nationally. And if those numbers correlate, we are very, very close to how the rest of the nation is doing per se. Or if our numbers are higher, we're doing better. It's kind of like that MCA national average too.
Are we unique in any way that we're doing this intense study of our kids? Does everybody have FastBridge? So if I went to Belgrade and Eden Valley and.
So FastBridge it is probably one of the more popular across the state. There used to be a program called Ames Web. You would have heard that a few years ago. This has taken its place, and it is, but the MTSS process, the multi-tiered systems of support, that's really what the foundation of why districts, us included, use data like this to really drive what do our kids need, because it really helps us to know at this moment in time, what is the deficit that we need to target if the kid is, even if they're doing wonderfully in class, but there's a deficit where there's maybe a gaps, they missed something last year as a result of COVID instruction, they missed phonemic awareness, or they missed, a portion of algebraic expressions, then we can target that, right? But that system is used across the state, and so there's a lot of really good networks of how do you use this data, how can you take that information and then develop teams, develop interventions for kids, because it is widely used across the state.
Yeah, so I would say FastBridge is the tool and kind of like our data warehouse. And so we use the assessments, and it also keeps all of that data for us, which is really great. But as an MTSS team, and actually, can we just scoot forward to the reading since that's my area, and I'll.
Whoops, there we go. Did I go one too many?
No, that's great.
Okay.
So for reading, let's just pretend it's fall and all of our students just did the A reading, and A stands for adjustable, which is what Marie was just saying, it changes according to who is taking the test. So I get this data, I'm gonna be honest, I don't look at these bars and say, wow, we really need to do something with reading with 8th grade. It's not what I do. So on FastBridge, this is the big picture, and this tells us big picture wise, how is the middle school doing? And these are the conversations we would have at the end of the year with our English department, and we would sit down and look at this and say, okay, clearly we need to dig in and figure out what we can really work with our whole 8th grade class on, right? But FastBridge has more in-depth, and so that is what I would look at and Marie would look at. So let's say our kids take the test in the fall. Is this okay to explain right now?
Absolutely.
Just to kind of dig in?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So our kiddos take the A reading test in the fall. And then Mr. Campbell and I sit down and look at all of the A reading scores. And what it does is it lists all of the kids' names, and then according to their area, some risk, low risk, high risk, it color coordinates them. So we first go into the high risk and we look at all of those kids' names. And we also have this spreadsheet that the elementary uses where we look at longitudinally, where were these kids last year? So if someone's name pops up and Joe Smith is popping up in 8th grade as a red, right, like high risk here, most likely by 8th grade, we know their names and we know the kiddos and we know what we're working on already with them. But if he kind of just pops up, we would say, okay, hold on a second, where was he in 7th grade? If it shows that his scores have been declining, then why have they been declining? And that is when we pull those kids that we need more information, and that's when we give them a diagnostic test. So this is the big picture to figure out. It's kind of like a colander with really big holes to figure out what kids need some more help. And then we take those kids and then we give them diagnostics to figure out, well, what does he need help with? Does he need help with that phonological awareness? Does he need help with phonics, fluency, comprehension? Where is the deficit? Oh, maybe his parents are really struggling at home right now and things are falling apart and he needs some support and he needs someone to talk to. I go reach out to our social worker and hook those two up so that she's able to talk with them and build that relationship. And then we keep an eye on him and we look in the winter and see how he's doing in the winter then. So it really, like, this is just the really big picture, standing back, how are things going? But then as an MTSS team, we dig into every student and we look at every kiddo and how they're doing. And we try to figure out what they need. So Mr. Campbell is doing fluency interventions with students based off of CBMRs that we've given that show, yep, they need some fluency help. They're really slow readers. They have the phonological, they have the phonics, but they're really slow readers. And we're doing phonological interventions for kiddos who have missed out for whatever reason. A lot of times when a kiddo has a big event in their life when they're younger, they miss out. They're in that fight or flight mode or their mind is focused on something else, and so they miss out on some of that, the big blocks at school. And so even though we have students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we're doing phonological awareness activities with them because they've missed out on that. And it's really hard to move forward when you can't sound out a multisyllabic word in high school chemistry. So it really does, this is just the big picture, but it really, we have lots and lots of other diagnostics to give us a much better picture of where each kiddo is at and what we can do for them.
Are you also looking at the kids who exceed?
Yes.
And then, cause I was just curious if there's flags on.
Absolutely. So Marie was just showing me little progress monitoring graphs a couple minutes ago, pointing at it like, look at this kiddo, he's doing so great. And we at the elementary have conversations about our kids much more often because we're together constantly all the time and we're with our kids 30 minutes every day. And so we have
move a lot faster at that
and
level.
they move a lot faster at that age. And so we have those conversations and there'll be a kiddo who is, okay, what are we doing? What else can we be doing? And then she shows me the graph of, oh, he's growing, he's doing awesome. There are kids, obviously the focus is more on the students who are struggling and how we can boost them up. But this year alone, we've had at least a handful of conversations with kids who made tremendous growth, and I'll try to pull them out in the hallway and say, or I guess we've emailed home a couple times too, but pull them out in the hallway and say like, oh my gosh, did you realize that your score went up by 20 points? What the heck happened with that? You know, and then they're just beaming and they're excited and yes, so we try to for sure pick out those kids who are really showing a lot of growth.
And when they are showing a lot of growth, or the students who are in a higher, not a higher, but a deeper ability level than our students, when we're working with our students, those kiddos are getting exactly what they need with a different teacher. They're getting an intervention. It's
It's at
just
their
a
level.
different one to dig deeper at their level. So we're all getting interventions. It's just a matter of what you're getting and based off the data that you have.
And exactly what you need.
Anything else that you want me to show on that one, or should I go on to the next one?
Go on to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so this information was from last year and this year. And this is on the PSAT, which is the preliminary scholastic aptitude test, which kind of for students who are interested in taking the SAT or the ACT. It's not a requirement, and last year we had 23 of our juniors take this test, and this year we had 14. So our numbers are down. We attribute that to a couple things. Students just haven't been really interested in that preliminary test, and there are colleges that are beginning to waive the ACT and SAT requirements. So, you know, years ago when all students would be taking one of those two tests, those really that's not happening anymore. So of the 14 students, we had a mean score of 1040. And then if you look at the state score of 1099, and then the national would be of 994. If you look at our participants from the previous year to this year, it's down. But if you look at the participants from in the state and national, those are actually up. And in having a discussion with Mrs. Campbell about this, I think part of that is we were in school most of the time last year, and many schools around the state last year were either online or hybrid, and around the country. And so this year, more of those schools are in person. And so I think that's probably why the number is up for those groups. If you look at of the 14 students, we have the English, the ERW, which is English reading and writing, and all 14 of our students met that benchmark compared to 87% in the state. And then math was a little bit more of a struggle for us, 43%. And then we had with the 100%, all of our students at least met partially. With 14 students, I went in and eliminated the lowest score, and it brought it up 15 points. So, you know, one student can make a big difference in that. This is a test that it's offered in October, and it is about a 3.5 hour test. So there is some rigor to it. We are in the process of registering students for the ACT, and the deadline is February 18th for an April 5th test. And we right now we have 8 students signed up for it, and we're trying to encourage students to sign up for it. With high school students, they typically wait till the last few days anyway. We anticipate decent numbers, but overall those numbers have really decreased in the last few years.
These are free, right?
No, the district pays, I believe, $20 of it. So there is a $25 fee for students, but if they qualify for free and reduced, then it's free. Okay, grade report. We did this report was done last year just out of curiosity when we were in remote learning. And it's data, but it's not, it's just a brief snapshot. So first semester of last year, we had 36 students who earned at least one D on the D and F report. The second quarter of this year, we had 24 students that earned at least a D. And then the F report for the same grade levels, 20 students last year, and second quarter this year, 14. I think, and I talked about this last year, our teachers, one thing that came out of the pandemic and being in remote and being in a number of different learning models, our teachers have really become in tune with student issues and struggles and mental health issues that have been going on, and just everything that students have in their lives. And our teachers have done a really good job of working with students to give them extra time to get some things done. And we're trying to eliminate the hard and fast cut line on things. We want students to grow and understand the material and come out of that class with something. And grades are really important in a lot of ways, but also it's really important that students have an opportunity to learn how something works. And if they do poorly on a test the first time, we don't want to just move on to the next area. We want those students to be able to, be proficient in those areas and then moving on to the next. So I think overall our teachers have done a really good job of meeting students where they are in the academics, but also in the mental health and other areas. And then a GPA comparison, 11th to 12th grade, same students. First semester last year, the first semester this year, pretty much identical. Okay. Any questions?
All right.
Thank you very much for all the data and information.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead.
Move on to referendum.
All right, so a couple of things that I have for you. This is just very, very high level oversight, but I have contacted 2 different survey firms, and I will have information from them to present at the February board meeting to really kind of look at, and I had high level discussion with them about what do you think is important and how is the best way to kind of approach surveying our community and really trying to understand the best way for us to know, I guess, if we're on target, from timing, from the ask, from, we've talked about the capital levy, all of those pieces. So I'll have that information to present to you from those 2 different firms. And I reached out to School Perceptions, which you are familiar with. That is the firm that did the survey for the district prior to the 2019 building bond. And then I also reached out to Leatherman, I'll have that, but they have 2 different approaches and 2 different styles, and so I'll present that to you on February 22nd. The other thing I wanted to let you know is I did receive the data file from, which is our voter data file. Again, I had no idea that this existed, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Really what it is of our 3,400 registered voters, I get that information, that data, and then I can just purely see whether an individual turned out to vote or they didn't. And it goes back to, I have the information from 2019 as well. It is a lot of data, and so what I'm doing is going through and sorting it by staff members, by parents at the secondary, parents at the elementary. And again, I can't see what was voted, I just see participation, right? And so we can then see if there are groups of individuals that we really need to kind of understand, you know, help, is there a reason why, you didn't get out and weren't active, or was it just not, you know, not on the radar? So, more information to come on that. I'm gonna ask for a little bit of grace in the timing. Like I said, it's 3,000 lines, and I go through every line and enter a checkbox into you're a parent, you are a staff member, or you are a secondary. So it's good information, and I think it will really help us understand kind of the demographics of our voting community. So that was good information. So that really, like I said, it's a very high level update on those two items that we had talked about last month, and I wanted to be able to give you an update on those two items.
Can we talk about that a little more?
Sure.
Okay, so just my thoughts. I'm looking at this thing, and part of what happens when we're looking at referendums, a lot of people said they didn't understand the referendum for whatever reason. I hear it a lot. And I'm looking back saying, okay, so we're in the customer service business, right? We're providing an education to a bunch of kids to make their future someday. Well, the issue becomes is when we take that that group of people and we do these referendums, the vote is by 3,500. We have 900 students. Not sure always how many members of that family are voters, but let's assume that it's somewhere around 1,500. There's still 2,500 voters out there who don't know. We just had an absolutely fantastic report here on this fast bridge, which is totally exciting to me. But how do you get that to the public? Because when they're making an analysis on ours, they're taking a part of what we're doing in the school, or looking at a specific budget. But we have so many great things that are going on, and we have these artificial walls that sit around this place, and the only time we ever want to talk about it out of here is when we're looking for money.
Right.
So going back to what you said, all three of the last ones, my mind is on this. How do we get that to the public?
Yeah.
Personally, as I thought about it, I remember seeing a brochure that was done by two schools. One was done by the metro area. I don't recall exactly what the school was. And this came from the conferences. But one was by Kimmel School, where on a periodic basis, everybody that had a mailbox was getting something about the school.
Sure.
Okay, so I look at some of our methods. Yep, everybody's got internet. Well, then I think about when we had all of the COVID lockdown, everybody had internet, but they didn't really. They had a phone with data time on it, and we were giving out a whole pile of jetpacks.
Right.
So I'm not really buying that everybody is doing that, but they're still voting.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of older people and a lot of people in those groups that are so interested in what's going on up at school here, but they don't necessarily participate. Maybe they're not into sports.
Right.
Maybe not. Is there a way that we could create a budget to pay for a mailing and decide on like a quarterly something that we get out to people? The ones that I saw were 8 pages long, but this fast bridge, do people know what we're working on here?
Right.
And I just off the top, I can remember when the math instructors were here, 3 of them, explaining what they were doing on the math department and some positive things going on. I remember the English department, you were probably a participant in that. English department was here. Nobody sees that. In fact, they're seeing what you're seeing right here at home. They're not seeing anything off of that screen.
Sure.
They don't have any idea in most cases when they're watching at home what we're talking about.
Sure.
That's not transparency. So how do we achieve that? Personally, I'm interested in getting a mailing out to anybody, and I'm gonna base it on the last survey that came in, and most everybody on there was interested in getting the data in the mailbox, and the survey was very interesting. Certainly, did everybody see it? I don't know, but how do we bridge that?
Sure.
We don't have a budget, so if I talk to you about the mailings, or talk to our other two superintendents about, oh, we don't have a budget for that. Boom, it's out the window. Well, maybe we should. Maybe we should have something to keep track of the people that are spending the money to make the school happen, that need the school here to keep their assets of their home and everything higher. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the areas that the survey companies may be able to help us with as well, is what is the best form of communication? What is the best way for us to get information into the hands of people that are not part of our school district? Because that is one of the benefits of the survey, is it's not only our school users, it's our voters as a whole, yeah.
But we got multiple things. We're gonna turn right around with a tech levy, or we're gonna add a tech levy to the next one. We don't know that.
No, we don't.
Okay, so is there a picture today of a massive amount of computers that were delivered that's gonna hit somewhere?
Sure.
Like a picture that was mailed out to everybody, this is kind of what we're spending. Maybe
Yeah.
Maybe everybody believes that our methods of communication are there. It is really difficult between the Facebooks of everybody and the internet for whatever going into our school program, but most all of the people voting have a mailbox. And something like that needs to go in there. But I'm not looking for just this. I think it would be better for the school board, better for everybody in the district if we started bragging about what we do here.
Yeah.
We are the best, and not telling a single soul out there, except, well, we need $500,000 here based upon these statistics. Okay, what if we would had information out in advance? I know it kind of sounds out there, but I think transparency with the public, and there's so much stuff that goes on in here. I could take anybody in here, I could take any instructor in here, ask them what they do different, things that they do. Maybe I wouldn't be the best for analysis, but I will guarantee everyone has something special they do that other instructors may not. Well, how do we get that to the public so they know that we're doing what they want, we're educating kids, we have a great offering? We actually went from 950 students down to 900, we're short 500 or 50 kids. Okay, that's a big deal.
Right.
Do we just accept where we're at? That can help us with that too.
Sure.
Because how many people that still have their kids at home, or however, there's 50 kids that aren't here.
Right.
Were they thinking they weren't satisfied with their customer service that we were maybe actually doing, but they didn't know about it?
Sure.
Because the only place they're gonna get some of it is here, and they're gonna look at a picture like that, that doesn't tell them anything, so. Anyway, I
Yep.
said
And
enough.
I can make sure that, and to your point, I can make sure that the information that we link it some way so that people, if they do go to the video, they can have access to find all the references and documents so that they can see it. Because I hear what you're saying. I do think there is a lot of viewership and a lot of people watch. So if we can help them find that information. And I think, I think that's part of the task we have in front of us. It's not just one way of communicating, it's multiple methods and multiple means, getting that same message across. I agree.
In short, our marketing effort shouldn't be ahead of a vote, it should be
All the
4
time.
times a year,
That's exactly what I'm
every
trying to
year,
say.
so that every 10 years when we go back for a vote, they've had 40 pieces of marketing ahead of.
Absolutely, yep.
And I think we also need to look at that we live in a retirement community. I mean, last time, at one point, we were like in the top 10 of retirement communities, and a lot of those people don't have internet, or they don't want internet. So, I mean, the newspaper is still printing, if we could even put something in there. I mean, a lot of people I know don't read it, but some of our older generation do. So.
Maybe not older. Someday I got gray hair, but someday when I retire, one of my goals may never be to look at a computer again and do it.
There you go.
Because I've
You
been doing
can
it for
read
so many.
too.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm just saying, that we need to remember that a lot of our voters don't know how to use a computer. Sure.
And I think it starts internally, like, do our parents all know? And I think if you're a parent and then you're talking to, you know, the kid's grandparents or anybody who's in the area, so is there opportunity like with conferences coming up, that there could be like a takeaway, like, did you know we've improved this much? So that parents feel confident in that, or something just small, or, you know, when you sign up for conferences, something that each parent could read, or maybe signs when parents come in, like, we've improved, just so that there's visibility in that way, because if parents don't know, then a lot to celebrate, I guess, is what. Like,
With that, we'll go on to information roundtable, and I'll just kind of open up right away, because you know, mentioned last month we went to the MSBA conference, and just not put everybody on the spot if you don't want to, but give an opportunity to kind of discuss some of the great things we were able to witness and be part of in going to the MSBA conference. You know, last year we missed it because of COVID, and at least missed the in-person factor of it, and it just wasn't the same. As we all know, anything that has to be done virtually that's normally done in person just doesn't have that same feel. And kind of getting back to it this year really gave a lot of that same feel again. And unfortunately, I think for most of us, I know myself, left early with the weather on Friday, just to try to safely make it home. So kind of felt like got a little shortened out again this year, but yeah, if anybody's got anything they want to share in regards to the MSBA conference, go ahead. Table's yours.
sure, go ahead, you go first.
I attended the phase 2 training, for the school board, or Minnesota School Board. And during that, it was very interesting because I learned a lot about the budget. And I got a lot of slides that I think we could use to our advantage when we are talking to our voters about the upcoming levy, and just really explaining how this vote is the operating and how that's different from the building, and just visuals to help support that. So there's a lot of good information.
I highlight, I love this because I love learning and going to class, so it was super fun. But though, I'll talk about the three that I gained the most from. The one we went to on pay equity, I know a couple of us were there, and that was just really interesting. We can do an audit basically, which should be done, I think they're recommended every 4 to 5 years. And then also not only looking at that part of it, but each positions they're weighted. And so you should be looking at that and auditing that as positions change, technology, things like that, that you're not holding a position to the same weight if, you know, that it was 20, 30 years ago. And so that's something that I thought I didn't know that we could do that. And I thought that was really interesting, especially, you know, with negotiations. The other two that I'll highlight, I went to 2 of them. They were presented by a legal firm, and they were talking about some of the topics that are just out there right now. So one of them was on the First Amendment rights within a school. And really what they did is they went through case studies, which was super interesting, on how courts are ruling and basically what has happened with certain situations and how courts have voted. And I mean, just high level, you know, we all know this, like, you don't have the right to say whatever, whenever, right? You can't say fire in a movie theater. There's certain things that, you know, there's consequences, or bomb in an airplane, right? And, you know, and the school is a unique space, as I said. And so when they talked about freedom of speech, if there is, they use the word substantial disruption, then the school can intervene. It's not just somebody feels uncomfortable or doesn't like it. It has to cause a substantial disruption within a school for something to be changed or eliminated, or a t-shirt or what flag, whatever it may be. And so it was interesting hearing them go through different scenarios of what has happened recently and, you know, all across the country in those certain situations, and how a school should handle it and where you would be legally liable. And the other one was on transgender students. So the Minnesota survey that I think comes out every 3 years, or is it 2 years? I forget. Says that about 2% of our students across Minnesota are transgender students. And so it again went through case law of what's happening with that. And I felt good knowing that students are protected under our current policies for the most part. Our harassment and bullying policy, I forget what number it is, that does uphold, you cannot discriminate against somebody who's transgender for any of those reasons. So I felt better about that, knowing that we are covered, because I've been wanting maybe to look at some policies, because MSBA does have a recommended one. It's not one that you have to take or anything. But it's, I don't know if we would ever look at that at some point in time. I'm just looking at what else. I took a lot of notes on that one. Yeah, I won't go into more detail, but
I'll say, and I went to the pay equity one as well, and legal one. And I felt, I guess this year, maybe it's just where our climate is as a population, but there were more legal seminars I felt this year than there have been in previous years, but yeah, just kind of having that peace and understanding, and then also just being able to associate around other school boards and other districts, and kind of a little kind of conversation that you get to have or hear into with other districts, and understanding kind of where we're at, and I actually feel like in a lot of ways we're a very blessed district. We've had very few to no issues with things, and it's just when you start talking about just general public and public meetings, where you have upset community members about different policies or different things going on, and again see a lot of those legal aspects that you can deal with in the district when it in regards to your policy. So I've been really fortunate on that end of things. But yeah, it was kind of a good conference for me.
I'll just mention, I've got something else I want to bring up too afterwards, but, so real quick, Cheryl and I think, went to the same one, so I'll let her speak, but I'll just say we went to the Minnesota State High School League seminar, and after listening to them, I do feel a little better about what happened last year with the spike and increase of money. I could understand more their position that they went through, but hopefully they've learned some lessons, and they're better prepared in the future for what might happen. But I'll let Cheryl say anything else about the other ones we went to.
We went to the school board members' role in employment matters also, and that was kind of an eye-opener for me. It kind of bothers me that we're supposed to be hiring and firing, but we really don't have any say in the hiring and firing other than voting. We don't get any information. And that was really eye-opening to me, what we actually can do. We pretty much just make and follow the policies and make sure they're enforced. That's the biggest part of our job. And I mean, there was a lot more to it. And a lot of different things that they talked about. But that was pretty much what our role is. And we can pretty much decide if we want to have a bigger role. And we can be part of it, but we're not encouraged to. So that was frustrating to me, but I sat through the whole thing. And also, the school members' part in employment matters, I got copies of the paperwork because I didn't get it out in time, if anybody else wants some to read through. And the laws on crowdfunding, fundraising, and donations. The MSBA actually recommends that the donations be a separate resolution, not in the consent agenda. So that we can get forth what's been donated and what we're following through with and how we're following Title IX. And it's been a while here, so I've got to look at my notes. And once the monies come in, they're actually public funds because they're part of the school. Once there's a donation made, it belongs to the school.
Right.
And we make the decision if we're going to make it accountable to whatever they decided to donate it to, or if we're going to refuse it.
Correct.
We also have to make the decision if we're going to accept that money, if it's designated for one program, if it violates Title IX.
Correct.
If they do donate to something that would violate Title IX, we can make the decision to accept it, and we have to reciprocate to make that balance
Sure.
as a school district. A lot of our people around out here don't know that. And that's been, and all gifts from booster clubs and other community organizations should be recognized and accepted through school board resolution also. So it should come through, so everybody gets recognition. So we know that that money's coming in from our community or from our clubs.
And as an aside, that is an area that the policy committee is taking a look at, so just know that it'll be coming forward with some information on that too, so.
And we should have all of the fundraising activities reported to the board also with reports. And that would come through here so that it would be public, so that the community knows too.
So like as a for instance, in that regard, like the Cherry Dale, when we do our Cherry Dale, so those donations come in, those are recognized. And those are then acknowledged for a specific purpose, yep.
And FFA has done the same
Yep.
way, we always get those reports.
Yep.
And the German club and the Spanish club,
Yep.
when they plan their
For
trips.
fundraisers, yep.
Yep.
So what about like the sixth grade one? When they sell their candy bars to go to winter camp?
I'm not sure, I'll have to look at it.
Monies were accounted for in the office, but I don't believe we got a report here.
Yeah, that's what that's just what, I mean, I know that
I did
It
see
is-
they got accounted for it,
It
but.
is fundraising, but technically it's not
It-
tax deductible, right? So
Yeah,
it's not a
that's true.
gift
No,
under
but
the
it is
IRS.
fundraising though, which should be accounted for.
Is it fundraising that is, like, it could be taxed, or is it, cause fundraising is two different things, like, you can fundraise, and if you have an exchange of good, that's fundraising, but it's actually not philanthropy, right? You're getting something in return. Versus if you're fundraising, you're getting nothing, and you're saying, I'm gonna, pay for this program, then that's tax deductible. Sometimes it differentiates that way. But I don't know if it's, cause that would just go into a fund to pay the bill.
Yeah.
Because there was an exchange.
But it comes through the.
It should still
comes
come
the
through,
schools, so
yes, it still should come.
I
Yep.
think it'd be nice to be able to say to public, X amount of dollars
Yes.
went through the school
Yes, I agree.
above and beyond our budget.
Yep.
And what is that percent, and
I agree.
how does that, I think that's a number that we'd all be interested in.
Yeah, and I think it also is, and I was doing some research back to, I think a number of years ago, our community was really heavily burdened by multiple fundraisers. And there was a lot of requests for donation. And so I do know that there has been some work around streamlining and having some of that, approved fundraisers and for what purpose and all of those pieces. I think it is an area that we absolutely can continue to look at, because I think there's just maybe, whether it's process or it's procedure, ultimately, and I did have a conversation with MSBA this week, actually, just to find out what is the best recommendation. And so we're gonna look at that a little bit more closely. But it is, it's a good topic to dig into.
It was really interesting to dig into, and there are a lot of statutes and rules and regulations that we have to follow that
Yep.
they touch on each time, so it's a good refresher if you've had it before.
Yeah, yep.
So for me, the most interesting one that I got to it was actually just a little one. It was in one of the round tables. And I got there based upon, it was something with curriculum, and I can't even remember the topic exactly right off, but the content became a lot different. When we were talking about the graduation requirements of what credits everybody needs in certain places, right? It hasn't changed in like 30 or 35 years. And I said to them, the person was from the Department of Ed, I said, well, what else in your life hasn't changed in 30 years? I mean, are we talking about an Estes rocket that you launch with a battery? Or rockets that are taking people into space, right? We're taking people into space. Does it really mean? And so I said, well, we have like the world's best workforce. We're working on the trades. We're working on all this. It has no effect on what you did 30 years ago or 35 years ago. I mean, does that ever update itself?
Yeah.
How does that coordinate? Well, obviously, it wasn't a question anybody was prepared. But it looked to me like it might not hurt us to call legislators
Yeah.
and things like that and have them start to look at this thing right now. Because our world has changed. The kids going into the trade schools are finding absolutely fantastic careers along with what the four-year students are. But it's kind of changed a little bit. Not that there's a lot of basic things, but there's also things in there that maybe could coordinate more to what the state talks about with world's best workforce and all of this stuff. But it has some meaning when maybe we look at what it takes to graduate. Or how many times do we talk about different paths?
Right.
So we got this kid going this path, and we got this student going that path. Okay, but there's only one path to get your certificate of graduation.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I was flabbergasted.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just thought I'd mention it. I'm gonna call both of our representatives and ask them about it, because we have to move. We have to move with society, and we have to move as we go here. And we can't be using something from, there's hardly anything I can think of today that was going on in 1990 that I could see value other than having history of knowledge of something, right? We don't use that today.
And I will, my little stand on a soapbox and say, part of the reason there's been no change is because we can't agree on how it should change, right? Because you have different perspectives on what should it be, more in this area and this focus from the requirement, what's required, which path should have more focus and emphasis. So I think there has just, then it's just stays. I hear what you're saying.
Well, I
but
just found it fascinating.
I think that's gonna be part of what we're gonna hear as we have those dialogues is, so then what should it be? And how does that change take place legislatively? So, keep us posted, I'm curious.
Well, more than one path. Let's treat it all in the same thing.
Right.
Doesn't mean you couldn't coordinate some of this curriculum to give that student the same thing, but two different paths.
Yeah.
One that is very successful, so somebody that maybe the path that they're saying wasn't quite so good,
Yeah.
but not taking away any of the merits of that individual. Anyway.
Interesting.
There was one more thing that I forgot to mention that I should have, the transgender.
Thank you.
I'll bring up what I got next month.
Okay, sounds good.
Was they talked about the use of preferred names and pronouns, and that intentionally not using somebody's preferred name or pronoun does open you up to discrimination. And it's no different, like, my name is actually Margaret, and I ask people to call me Maggie. It's really no different, and it's not that hard to honor people's preferred name. And that's something that it does open you up to discrimination if somebody is intentionally not calling them by their preferred name or pronoun.
Yep.
Outside of that, only other things that I wanted to just discuss quick was time of meeting, how that's working for everybody. If anybody's having any issues with 5 o'clock, I'll say just personally, it's a little bit more of a struggle in my household than many others. My wife doesn't usually get off work till between 5 and 5:30, but we're managing. It's not unmanageable. It just makes a little hiccup a couple times a month. But if everybody else is fine, the one thing that is nice is the 2-hour meeting gets done at 7 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock, and we kind of have a little more of a evening to it. So, and then Steve, I don't know if it's okay if I bring up what you called me about the other day.
No, I wanna keep that
Okay.
to something else, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that then. So,
Yeah.
So I want to add on to what you just said about the time. The whole idea to the time is to try and coordinate this together so people can find times that are work for them, so someday they can be looking at sitting on a school
Running
board.
for board.
So I think we should take note of that.
Yep.
You know, maybe a 5:30 is a better number.
And that's what I
Or-
would think too.
But
that-
that's exactly why we wanted to talk about it, so
Yep.
thank you.
And that's the one thing that I think we could definitely discuss, and coming into January of next year, it'd certainly be a better conversation at probably a 5:30 versus a 5, and just to kind of hold that together. But anything else anybody want to bring up? Hearing none, meeting adjourned.